Tonight's video has 3 stories that kept getting worse the more I read them. These are easily some of the most disturbing stories I've read on this channel. I lived by myself for about 2 years in this little rental house. I usually just tell people near Traverse City because nobody knows the actual town unless they're from around there. My place sat off this long gravel road with woods behind it and only a couple other houses spread out along the road. Kind of peaceful in a depressing way. There were almost no streetlights and the woods behind the house were really thick. The house was old. I worked at a lumber supply place about 20 minutes away. I wasn't really social back then. I had friends, but nobody I saw often. My parents lived in Ohio, and my younger sister was in college somewhere in Indiana at the time. After a bad breakup, it felt easier not having somebody around constantly. Looking back now, though, I think I got too comfortable being isolated out there because I stopped thinking about basic safety stuff. Like I never locked the side door during the day. Sometimes I forgot at night too. I left blinds open all the time. If somebody had been watching my house for even a week, they probably would have learned my entire routine pretty easily. The woods behind the house stretched pretty far back. There was an old trail people used for 4-wheelers and hunting during deer season. Occasionally I'd hear ATVs late at night or gunshots during hunting season, but that was normal there. One weird thing, though, was people dumping trash back there sometimes. Old mattresses, tires, random junk. A few months before everything happened, county workers had to remove this abandoned RV someone burned halfway up the trail. That area always had this weird feeling to it after dark. Just the feeling that people could do things back there and nobody would notice. I remember the exact week this happened. My furnace sucked, so the house always felt chilly unless I kept it running constantly, which got expensive. That whole week I'd been working overtime because one of our guys quit suddenly. I was exhausted all the time. I remember coming home Friday night and just crashing on the couch for a while before getting up to microwave something. Before it happens, everything feels aggressively normal. I think around midnight, I went to bed. My bedroom was at the end of the hallway and the front door was basically straight across from the living room. If someone knocked loud enough, you could hear it clearly through the whole house because the walls were thin. Sometime during the night, I woke up suddenly to pounding on the front door. I heard somebody yell, "Police!" I checked my phone and it was around 2 a.m. "Police department! Open the door!" There were 2 voices, one loud and aggressive, the other calmer. I threw on sweatpants and walked into the hallway still half asleep. The front windows had blinds, but light from outside came through a little. I figured it was headlights from a patrol car. I don't know why I didn't look through the window first. I think because they said police and my brain just accepted it immediately. I had never had cops come to my house before. I thought something happened nearby or somebody hit a deer on the road. I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly. When I opened the door, it was only a few inches at first, and immediately my stomach dropped because the guy standing closest wasn't wearing any uniform at all. Just a dark hoodie pulled tight around his face and gloves. Black gloves. Behind him was another guy dressed basically the same. There was no police car. The guy closest jammed his boot into the door. "Don't close it," he said. I remember trying to push the door instinctively, but he shoved hard enough that it flew inward and hit the wall. The second guy stepped inside immediately and closed the door behind him. Everything after that felt slow and weirdly calm. That's what bothers me when I replay it in my head because I always imagined something like that would be loud and chaotic. But these guys acted relaxed, like they'd done this before. The taller one looked at me and said, "Sit down on the couch. Don't do anything stupid and nobody gets hurt." Then he lifted his hoodie slightly and showed me a handgun tucked in his waistband. They say fight or flight, but there's another thing where your brain just kind of stalls out. I remember thinking they had the wrong house. That thought kept repeating in my head. I sat down on the couch because I didn't know what else to do. My legs felt weak. The shorter guy stayed near the front door watching me while the taller one walked through the kitchen looking around. He opened cabinets casually like he lived there. At one point he actually asked me, "You live here alone?" I nodded. He said, "All right," and kept moving around. The house was dead quiet besides cabinets opening and closing. I could hear my furnace running. My mouth felt dry as hell too. I kept thinking I should say something, but I didn't know what. The shorter guy finally said, "There was a break-in nearby. We just need to do something and then we're leaving." That made no sense, obviously, but the way he said it sounded rehearsed. Like he wanted me calm. He wasn't yelling. Neither of them were. The taller guy came back carrying one of my kitchen glasses filled with water. Then he pulled this black plastic trash bag from inside his jacket or somewhere. At first I thought they were robbing me and stuffing stuff into bags. But then he opened the trash bag carefully on the coffee table, like he didn't want to spill something. The smell hit me. I don't know how to describe it except metallic and rotten at the same time. That blood smell. I gagged instantly when it hit me. The guy poured the water slowly into the bag. I remember hearing liquid moving around inside already before he even poured the water in. That's what made my chest tighten up. The bag wasn't empty. I couldn't stop staring at it. The shorter guy noticed and said very calmly, "Don't look at it too hard," which obviously made it worse. The taller guy tied the first bag shut tightly, then pulled out another black trash bag and slid the first one inside it. He handled it carefully with both hands. Whatever was in there had weight to it, heavy enough that he lifted it slowly. Then he pressed the air out and wrapped duct tape around the outside. I think that's when I started realizing what shape it looked like. Not perfectly, not cartoonishly obvious, but rounded. Wrong. There was this heavy shape near one side of the bag and something about it looked too human. I felt freezing cold all over. The taller guy took out his phone then and snapped 2 quick photos of the bag on my coffee table. I finally managed to say, "What the F is that?" The shorter guy looked directly at me for the first time since coming inside and said, "You didn't see anything tonight." These guys seemed organized, focused, like this was a task they planned carefully. The whole house smelled awful by then. Strong enough it was making my eyes water. The taller guy grabbed the bag and both of them started heading toward the door. Before leaving, the shorter one stopped and looked back at me sitting on the couch. He said, "Wait 10 minutes before calling anybody." Then they left. I heard the SUV doors shut outside. I jumped up and locked the front door and called the cops. They walked inside and immediately reacted to the smell still lingering in the living room. One deputy literally stopped and said, "Jesus Christ." They separated me outside near one of the patrol cars while more officers searched around the property. They asked me probably 10 times if I knew the men personally, if I owed anybody money, if I was involved in something, stuff like that. At some point more police showed up, not just sheriff deputies. Around 4 in the morning they finally let me back inside briefly to grab some clothes because they wanted me down at the station for a more detailed statement. They asked specifically about the shape of the bag multiple times. I kept trying not to say head. It made me feel insane. But eventually I admitted that's what it looked like to me. I physically couldn't go back into the house. The sheriff's department suggested it too. My parents wanted me to drive to Ohio immediately, but I didn't want to explain everything over the phone yet. I barely understood it myself. The cops wanted to go over the timeline once more and ask about anything unusual in the weeks before it happened. Cars I didn't recognize, strange people around the area, deliveries, arguments, anything. For the next couple weeks, the police kept checking in. They took my phone records, asked if they could pull data from an old security camera I had mounted outside that didn't even work anymore. Apparently they were trying everything. The problem was my road didn't have many cameras nearby, and the SUV description was generic as hell. Dark SUV and basically describes half the vehicles there. I couldn't handle staying there anymore. For a long time after moving, I kept expecting closure from the investigation. Like eventually police would call and say they caught the guys or identified the victim or something. But months, years went by without much. This happened years ago now, and technically the case is still open as far as I know. I'm Amanda. At the time this happened, I had only been living by myself for 8 or 9 months. Before that, I had a roommate from college, and then after she got engaged, she moved out pretty quick, and I stayed in the apartment because it was cheap compared to everything else around me. This was in Ohio. The apartment complex itself wasn't nice, but it wasn't dangerous either. Mine was on the first floor facing the back parking lot. The back side of the building looked out toward this long ditch and a patch of woods behind a chain-link fence. I usually got home around 5:30 unless somebody called off and I had to stay later. Nights were exactly the same for me. You could hear toilets flushing from other units and people arguing. But weirdly enough, my section of the building got quiet after around 10. When you walked into my apartment, there was a tiny kitchen immediately to the left, then the living room straight ahead, hallway on the right side, bathroom first, bedroom at the end. My bed was pushed against the wall opposite the bedroom door because the room was small and there wasn't really another way to fit everything. So when you were laying in bed, you faced the doorway kind of diagonally. I slept with a standing fan on near the dresser. I liked living alone. I know some people get scared of it, but I liked being able to come home and not talk to anyone. My parents lived like an hour away, and my younger sister was in Kentucky at school, so it was just me. Sometimes my mom would call late and ask if I locked my doors and all that. Around 2 weeks before everything, I came home from work and my patio screen door was open a few inches. I found cigarette butts near the patio, even though nobody in the units around me smoked that brand. They were those black cigarettes. The night this happened, I woke up because somebody was talking. When you first wake up, you don't really understand where you are. I realized the voice sounded close, like inside the room close. I remember opening my eyes and everything looked blurry for a second because I didn't have my glasses on. My room was dark except for the digital clock on my dresser and some light from outside coming through the blinds. And there were two men standing next to my bed. I still can't explain what that felt like because you always imagine you'd scream immediately or fight, but my body literally locked up. One of them was standing near my dresser, and the other one was closer to the side of the bed, almost right beside me, both wearing dark clothes, gloves, ski masks, black masks with the eyes cut out. I think I made some kind of choking noise because the one beside the bed immediately said, "Don't scream. Don't scream and nobody's gonna hurt you." His voice was calm. That's one of the worst parts. He sounded normal, calm, like he was talking to somebody at a store. I started crying. I couldn't stop it. My whole body was shaking so hard the bed was moving a little. The other guy kept looking toward the bedroom door and then toward the window, like he was nervous about time. I said, "Please," over and over. Afterward, my throat hurt from crying and talking. I kept saying, "Please don't hurt me. Please take whatever you want." I told them there wasn't cash there. I don't even know why I said that. The man near the bed said, "We don't want your money." Then the other guy unzipped this duffel bag he had over his shoulder and took out this package. It was wrapped completely in brown tape and plastic. Bigger than a shoebox, but not huge. It was like something you'd ship electronics in. The wrapping looked weirdly professional, tight and clean. He held it against his chest, and the first guy told me I needed to get dressed and drive somewhere for them. I thought they were joking. I remember saying "what" probably 10 times. The first guy got more irritated then, more aggressive. He said all I had to do was drive where they told me and hand the package to somebody. That was it. Then they'd leave me alone. I said no. I know maybe that sounds dumb because obviously I should have just agreed, but my brain immediately went to something illegal, and I thought they were going to unalive me afterward anyway. I kept saying I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I was crying so hard. The second guy walked around my room touching things while I talked. He picked up a picture frame from my dresser, looked at it, put it back down. He opened one of my drawers and shut it again. The first guy told me I was making this difficult. Then suddenly he grabbed the lamp beside my bed and smashed it against the wall. I screamed. I couldn't help it. The bulb shattered everywhere, and the sound was so loud in that little apartment. The other guy immediately came over and grabbed my shoulder hard. He leaned close to my face and told me if I kept screaming, they were going to make things worse for me. Then the guy near the door tilted his head like he heard something outside. He left the bedroom quickly. I could hear him moving through the apartment. My front door opened and shut. For a few seconds, it was just me and the other man staring at each other. The one left in my room kept telling me to calm down, which was insane. I was crying so hard I almost threw up. Then the other guy came back into the bedroom fast and whispered something into his ear. Everything changed after that. The tension in the room got weird, like suddenly they were in a hurry. The guy holding the package stuffed it back into the duffel bag and looked directly at me for a few seconds. Then he said, "We'll be back," and both of them left the room. Then I heard the apartment door shut. My whole room smelled like the broken light bulb and dust from the drywall where the lamp hit. I finally got up and locked the bedroom door. My phone was in the living room charging, and I remember standing there trying to decide if I should even leave the bedroom to go get it, because I was convinced they were still somewhere inside the apartment. I forced myself out of the bedroom because I knew I needed my phone. I remember my legs barely working right. It felt like when you stand up too fast and almost pass out, except it just stayed that way. The hallway light was still off and the apartment looked normal at first glance except for little things being out of place. My purse had been dumped onto the couch. I grabbed my phone and locked the deadbolt. Then I called 911. My bedroom lamp was shattered everywhere and there was drywall dust on the carpet. My dresser drawers had been dumped out. They also found footprints near the patio door outside. The weird thing was there wasn't obvious forced entry. I didn't even date much back then. I had broken up with someone months earlier, but he lived in another state by then, and besides, this was not some prank. These men came prepared. Gloves, masks, bag, everything. The police took pictures of the broken lamp in the apartment. When the man had leaned close to me, I smelled something besides the gloves. Kind of like gasoline or motor oil. Something industrial. My parents came and got me around 3 in the morning. My mom cried harder than I did. My dad got angry in that quiet way he does where he barely talks. He walked through the apartment with the officers before we left and kept checking the windows himself like he didn't trust anybody else. I stayed with my parents and drove to work from there. My mom had to stop me at one point because I kept looking outside every 10 minutes. They couldn't find much physically besides partial shoe impressions outside and fingerprints around the patio area that didn't match anyone in the system. The problem was it was an apartment complex. Tons of random prints everywhere. He told me home invasions usually made sense financially, money, revenge, but this didn't really fit. He asked if I'd ever unknowingly witnessed something or gotten involved with somebody suspicious. I said no. So that's the whole thing. No one knows what happened. This happened, I think, around 2 summers ago. Me and T dated for almost 5 years, and a lot of the trips and random weekends blur together now. We used to do those cheap little cabin rentals pretty often because he was really into hiking and kayaking and all that outdoor stuff. Neither of us really got weekends off together unless we planned it ahead. This place was in northern Tennessee. It felt more like somewhere people lived full time, rather than one of those polished mountain towns with wineries and souvenir stores every 5 feet. We found the place on one of those rental apps late at night after T got paid. We were laying in bed looking through cabins and arguing about money a little bit. The usual couple stuff where one person wants to spend more than the other. The pictures had one of those fake HDR filters where everything looks overly sharp and orange. There was a small pond or pool thing behind the cabin and a fire pit and apparently private wooded property which T liked because he hated crowded campgrounds. The owner's name on the listing was Randy or something close to that. Older guy in his profile picture with a beard and sunglasses sitting on an ATV. The reviews were mostly good except for a few people saying the place felt off or too isolated. One review mentioned hearing noises outside at night, but honestly that didn't seem strange for a cabin in the woods. Animals make noise constantly out there. Every cabin trip I've ever been on has had raccoons or weird birds making sounds all night. We drove out there on a Thursday because T had Friday off too. The drive itself took around 6 hours counting stops. I slept most of the second half of the drive because I had worked that morning. The area got emptier the farther we drove. Long roads with stretches of forest and then random houses sitting way back from the road. There were old trailers, churches every few miles, little handmade signs for fresh eggs or firewood. My phone signal started dropping like 40 minutes before we got there. The cabin itself wasn't terrible when we first arrived. Smaller than the pictures, though. That annoyed me immediately. The outside looked older, too, like the listing photos were probably taken years before. The cabin sat near the edge of the woods, and behind it was this weird water thing I mentioned. I still don't totally know if it was technically a pool or a pond or what. It was man-made, I think, because it had stone around the edges and a little dock platform thing. But the water looked dark and murky like pond water instead of pool water. There was no fence around it. There was one bedroom downstairs and a loft area upstairs with another mattress. Tiny kitchen, a living room with this massive older TV mounted crooked over a fireplace. The place looked clean at first glance, but after unpacking I noticed little things. Dust, dead bugs near the windows. The owner texted T about 30 minutes after we arrived asking if we got in okay. T replied yes. Then the guy sent another message saying, "Cell service bad out there, so call if any issues," which seemed normal at the time. We hiked one of the nearby trails. Nothing scary happened. There were tiny things, though. One thing was how often cars seemed to pass the cabin road even though the area felt isolated. You'd hear gravel crunching outside every so often late in the evening. Another thing was T noticing a security camera nailed high up on a tree facing the driveway. We assumed it was for wildlife or trespassers. Cabins get broken into all the time, supposedly. T walked around later and found another one mounted under the roof edge near the back porch. That whole evening already felt uncomfortable for reasons I can't explain well. It had rained earlier and everything outside looked foggy and gray afterward. We grilled burgers on this old propane grill behind the cabin and sat outside for a while, but it got dark fast because of the trees. Once the sun dropped, it felt like the entire place just disappeared into blackness. The water behind the cabin bothered me more at night too. During the day, it just looked ugly. At night, it looked almost black. The little dock thing creaked every once in a while from wind. T kept throwing pebbles into it because he thought fish were jumping. Around midnight or 1, I woke up needing to pee. T was asleep beside me, snoring lightly. The cabin was dead quiet. I remember laying there checking my phone for a second because I couldn't fall fully back asleep after using the bathroom. I heard the first splash, like someone jumping into water feet first. Big enough that it immediately made me sit up. T woke up too because I think I said, "What the hell was that?" out loud without realizing. We both stayed quiet listening. Another splash came from behind the cabin. T got out of bed and looked through the back window. The blinds were partly open already. I remember him standing there not saying anything for a few seconds. Then he goes, "Babe." I got up too and looked past him. The surface of the water was moving hard. Ripples everywhere. It genuinely looked like something large had just gone into it. The woods behind the water were pitch black. Our porch light barely reached past the little dock area. T suddenly whispered, "Do you see that?" Near the muddy edge of the water there were footprints. At least I thought they were footprints. Huge ones. The mud around the edge looked disturbed too, like something had climbed out. T shined the flashlight near the edge of the pond or whatever it was, and the footprints became clearer. They looked human, except massive and oddly deep in the mud, like whoever made them was heavy. The toes looked spread out weird too, almost barefoot looking. Maybe someone was messing with us. The tracks led away from the water toward the backside of the cabin. The flashlight followed them right to underneath the back window near the bedroom, like someone had either been standing there or crouching there. I noticed mud smeared lightly against the cabin siding too. I remember saying, "Let's just go inside." But then we heard someone from around the side of the cabin. T swung the flashlight toward the sound fast and yelled, asking who was there. Then another crunch sound came from farther away, like whoever it was had moved off toward the driveway. We went inside after that and locked the door, even though those locks were useless. I started throwing clothes into our bags right away because I already knew I wanted to leave. Something felt seriously wrong. T grabbed the truck keys and said we'd just drive back tonight instead of staying another day. I was shoving toiletries into my backpack when T's phone rang, the cabin owner. T looked at the screen first without answering, and both of us just stared at each other. It was almost 2 in the morning. T answered on speaker after a few rings, and the guy immediately goes, "Everything all right out there?" T said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "Well, I noticed y'all loading up the truck." I swear I felt every hair on my arm stand up when he said that, because there was absolutely no way he should have known that. T immediately said, "What?" The guy repeated himself slower this time. I said I noticed y'all packing your truck up. Didn't know if there was a problem with the cabin. I remember T looking toward the window while he talked, like somehow the owner might actually be outside. There were no nearby houses, no road visible from the back of the property. T asked him straight up if he had cameras out there. He laughed and said, "Well, yeah, outside only. Liability reasons. Folks try to damage property sometimes." I started whispering to T to hang up. I didn't care if the cameras were technically legal or not. Something wrong. He never mentioned cameras watching the whole property. And if he was watching live at 2 in the morning, that meant he had literally been sitting there seeing us panic and pack while never once mentioning the sounds outside. T finally asked him if someone else was on the property. The guy answered way too fast. "Nope," the guy says, "probably just locals." And I swear his voice sounded irritated more than concerned. T asked why locals would be wandering around a private cabin property in the middle of the night, and the owner kind of ignored the question. He just kept saying stuff like, "People get bored out here and they don't usually bother anybody." T ended the call after that. The second he hung up, we started moving way faster, packing our stuff. The whole time I had this horrible feeling somebody was outside watching us. Not the owner through cameras, I mean physically outside. T kept checking the windows while grabbing our food and chargers and everything. At one point he froze near the living room window, and I thought he saw someone. "There's another camera." I walked over and he pointed toward a shelf near the TV. There was this little black thing sitting between 2 fake decorative plants. Tiny. Barely noticeable unless you were looking directly at it. T walked closer and picked it up. It was definitely a camera. Not like a Ring camera or something obvious. Smaller, hidden. I still get chills. Every weird feeling we'd had inside the cabin started making sense. Why the owner seemed to know exactly when we arrived. Why he texted at oddly specific times. Why the cabin somehow felt watched before anything even happened. It stopped feeling like random creepy woods stuff and started feeling targeted. Like somebody intentionally wanted people there. T was furious. I'd never seen him that angry before. He found at least 2 more little devices, but I don't know if all of them were actually cameras or sensors. I wasn't even paying attention anymore because all I wanted was to leave. While T loaded the truck, I stayed near the front door watching outside. As T backed the truck down the gravel driveway, the porch light suddenly shut off. Clicked off completely. Then the living room light inside went off too. Like somebody had started turning things off inside the cabin after we left.